This is Spiritual Principles for Emotional Healing with Dr. Denise Johnson, a show dedicated to the integration of spirituality, faith, mental health, and emotional wellness. I believe where your spirit leads, your emotions, power, and destiny will follow. Welcome to the show, everyone. You are listening to Spiritual Principles for Emotional Healing, and I am your host, Christian emotional wellness expert and licensed mental health professional, Dr. Denise Johnson. And the topic for today's wonderful show is breaking free from the cycle of toxic relationships. Does it feel like something has to change, but you are not quite sure how to change it? Are you struggling with feeling hopeless and stuck? If you answered yes to any of these questions, then I'm sure that you don't want to miss today's show with mental health professional Jasmine Menser-Lust, LCPC. Jasmine Menser-Lust is a licensed clinical professional counselor with her own private practice in the Chicago suburbs that specializes in working with women, individuals, and couples who feel stuck and who experience the pain of anxiety, depression, and low self-esteem. Jasmine is also the creator and facilitator of the only woman support group in the Chicagoland area that helps women cope with the emotional pain after an affair. She completed her graduate education at the Adler School of Professional Psychology in Chicago and has had 10 years of experience in the mental health field. She has worked in several different clinical settings, including hospitals, schools, and community mental health agencies, before opening her own practice called Catalyst Counseling, which has expanded to 2 different Chicagoland locations. Catalyst Counseling aims to strengthen the community by focusing on the dynamics of the family and overcoming the internal barriers that hold people back so they can recognize that the past does not write their future. Well, Miss Jasmine, you have a wonderful resume, and I am so excited about today's show, and I want to welcome you to the show today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that great introduction there. I'm excited to be here.
Excellent, excellent. So then I'm going to dive into the first question, which is, can you tell us a little about your personal history?
Yes. So for as long as I can remember, people have always been drawn to tell me their stories. We hear a lot of, it's always these 2 types of people say, well, if I'm always somewhere, someone will just come up to me and start talking, and then I was usually that individual. And it was no problem for me. I've always kind of found joy and actually being honored in being that person that they could lean on in that moment. So this really helped me very early in life clarify where I wanted to go. So I've known since it was early as middle school that I was going to pursue a career in psychology, and that career goal got more focused. Of course, the older I got, the more I learned about the field.
Excellent. Yeah. So can you tell us some about your spiritual history?
Yeah, my spiritual history, it actually kind of mirrors a lot of my personal history because they're really intermingled. As I like to look at myself as this whole person, and I was raised, and I am a Christian, so God was always, present in my life and had that presence in my life, and kind of gaining that clarity and understanding of who I was going to be as a person, how that crossed over, honestly, with my purpose of helping people, and then really figuring out my place in the world. All of that really incorporated into my spiritual journey and my relationship with God, which I'm not perfect. That journey still continues. So, it's definitely an ongoing journey today.
Excellent. What I also love to hear about your story is that I don't think a lot of people really understand that psychology and spirituality don't have to be mutually exclusive.
Right.
I think that for most of us that have a spiritual background, the psychology or the mental health aspect of it merges very, very easily with the values that you have as a spiritual person. You want to love people. You want to help people. You want to honor people. You talk about forgiveness. You're looking for meaning in life. And so it's always wonderful for me when I hear other mental health people have that same experience.
Yes, absolutely. I feel it's difficult for us to kind of go on our personal journeys and kind of ignore that spiritual component of ourselves. That really is definitely a huge piece of us as we navigate through those big questions, like you mentioned, of meaning. It's huge.
Yes, excellent. So then, how do you define and identify a toxic relationship?
Well, when I look at toxic relationships, there's kind of these main pieces that are consistent across the board, where there tends to be this lack of mutual respect in the relationship, where it can feel uneven. There tends to be a lot of weak boundaries, where it gets really muddled, really easily from person to person as far as where their identity ends and begins within their relationship. There's a lot of demeaning and critical communication patterns there where they're very critical to one another. But overall, just feeling drained from the relationship, because we know there's going to be ups and downs, but the negative moments really outweigh the positive ones. And I feel like that's the biggest key indicator where we start to evaluate.
Excellent, excellent. And so just to repeat what you're saying, all relationships are challenging at times, but I think the thing that demarcates a toxic one, if something is particularly excruciating and particularly painful and particularly demeaning, then it might begin to be bordering on what might be considered toxic.
Yes.
Excellent.
Because we may have conflicts with our partners, but when we start to undermine them and be really critical, kind of look down on them, and that's the real tone in the relationship, that's what really makes it toxic.
Yes. And I have observed something, and let me ask you about it and get your opinion about it. In talking with my own clients who are in toxic relationships, when you peel back the layers, what you often find is that relationship dynamic usually reminds them of something that they've already been in their past with some early caretaker. So maybe they had a very negative and toxic relationship with their father or their mother, or maybe whoever their first love interest was particularly toxic. What we find is that when we have trauma around these important relationships, somehow that trauma makes us a lot of times repeat or look for the same type of person over and over and over again.
Yes, I definitely agree with that. And I see that similar pattern with my clients as well, where it's unfortunate that it's repeating, but it seems like it's a benefit because it helps them bring light to what's currently going on, because they can compare it to that past event. So definitely those same patterns.
Yes, and then the other interesting thing, and I know that you'll appreciate this since you do have a Christian background, a lot of times clients will say, well, why does God keep letting me being in the same type of hurtful relationship over and over and over again? Doesn't he know that this is horrible and terrible and I'm suffering? But the thing about it that is interesting to me is I don't believe God allows you to continue in toxic relationships because he's punishing you. He allows you to continue in them because he wants you to develop insight, and he wants you to develop the power to break them, not only for you, but for the generations that are coming behind you. So that if you're the mother of children and you recognize your toxic patterns and you break it, that means that your children won't be doomed to repeat it, or your children's children. So I find it that we repeat it so that we can do something about it and change it and break it, and not because, God just wants to see us continue suffering over and over again.
Right. If you hit it right on the head with that, and it does feel more like a punishment initially because you're in so much pain. Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, excellent. So then how do you set boundaries in a toxic relationship?
Well, in setting boundaries, I feel overall the biggest part is consistency. So within toxic relationships, it can feel very challenging for that person to be consistent because their identity is so wrapped up in this other individual. So really being consistent in that message that they're sending to their partner, both verbally and non-verbally. So essentially, not only just what you're telling them, but actually what you're showing them. Because if you're not honoring yourself with your actions and your words, then that leaves room for someone to really jump in and say, okay, I can get in here and I can push their buttons or I can test their limits here. So it's unfortunate that within a lot of toxic relationships, it can teeter along the lines of being more physically and verbally abusive. So in that first piece, I say definitely, honor and respect those boundaries by being honest with yourself and questioning, am I safe here? And you can really honor and respect yourself by, if you're not safe in this moment, then this might be a time we have to evaluate, leaving this relationship and making sure that we get out safely. But if it is at this place where it's repairable and you do feel safe and just feel like your relationship needs a little bit of tweaking, doing things like owning your right to say no, because no is a complete sentence. I feel like it's very easily forgotten. Actually letting your partner know what you need and by directly saying it, not beating around the bush. That's kind of that wiggle room where we're not consistent with our actions and our words. So being very direct, knowing yourself and knowing your limits, actually sitting down and thinking, this is my limit, this is how far I'm willing to either be pushed or feel disrespected or consistently, feeling this unhappiness. But overall trusting yourself, because it's hard for us to be consistent when self-doubt comes into play. That's when we kind of pull back because we're not sure if we can really show up for ourselves and consistently trust our voice to use it so that our partners can hear us.
Yes, excellent points. So it sounds like it takes a lot of self-reflection in terms of looking at the qualities of the relationship that you're in. And then I heard you also say that the first thing is physical safety and setting a boundary regarding your physical safety, which may mean leaving if you have to. And then after that, I heard you talk about the other boundaries seem to be in relation to your emotional safety, it sounds like to me. Yes. And knowing what your limits are in that regard.
Absolutely. It's hard for us to maintain boundaries if we don't even know what our boundaries are. So that awareness and reflection really does help you to be consistent in your message. Because if you don't know your message, how would your partner even know what you're trying to say?
Yes, that's true. Which brings up an excellent point. I think that a lot of times it's helpful if we partner with someone around these kinds of issues, because sometimes it's easier for someone else to see something in the relationship than it is for you because you are emotionally entangled in it.
Right. So the feedback of family and friends are those that we trust, definitely highly valued. Sometimes I know when people start to make comments in our relationships, we tend to get defensive. And in the moment, since we are in our emotions, it's hard to forget that it might be coming from a place of love and concern. So really being open to listen to those that we trust and take that evaluation in.
Yes, excellent. All right, then. How do we repair our relationship after an affair?
Yeah, so with an affair, and it does really mix in with that toxic relationship because you can be your boundaries can be disrespected in this way as well. My biggest thing, because it is a nice long process, and I feel like it's having the patience to know that when trust is broken, that's part of the foundation that the relationship is built on. So in rebuilding it, you're really doing a lot of the opposite of what happened that created it to break in the first place. Such as the secrecy that had taken place. It's the opposite of secrecy, in my view, is really being vulnerable. Now you're being open. We're not holding as much back. We're kind of being able to be raw and put it all out there. The defensiveness tends to come up a lot as well when someone's having an affair, either emotional or physical affair. They tend to get defensive in their actions. So the opposite of that is now we're looking for our partner to be accountable. a lot of the times, and there's a lot of articles out here when people start to suspect their partner is being unfaithful, is that there's these changes in their behavior. They're inconsistent now. They're not the person that they were. So, and this is the hard part for the person who took a part and hurt their partner, that they have to be consistent in their story and in their actions. Because they're going through their own healing as well. So there's going to be inconsistencies on their part that might not even be because they're still engaged in an affair. It's because they're dealing with their own shame and guilt cycles. So them showing up and being consistent. And then also a lot of the unspoken boundaries that come up. Some people don't lay it all out there as far as what they determine to be an affair, which is why the emotional affairs can come into play and be really tricky, especially with social media. Everything gets very muddled. So it definitely sparks off a lot of issues, unfortunately. So being able to discuss and reestablish these boundaries within the relationship and what is respect, what is, an affair, what crosses that line.
Yes. The first thought that comes to my mind is it sounds like a lot of work. And
absolutely.
Yes, it's a lot of work. And a lot of times when you see couples where one person is cheated, it usually seems that the cheater isn't really up to doing all of the things that you just talked about to make the person that was cheated on feel better. A lot of times the cheater says, well, look, I was honest about it. You know what happened. Let's just put it behind us and move on. But based on what you're saying, it's not that simple to do.
No, not at all. And it's a common defense and hearing from the cheater, absolutely, because they're not willing to be that open. It's hard for them, to sit in that shame and guilt.
Well, I think this is the perfect place for a break. Please join us when we return, when my guest, mental health professional Jasmine Menser-Lust, LCPC, from Catalyst Counseling near Chicago, Illinois, will talk more about breaking free from toxic relationships. Welcome back, everyone. You are listening to Spiritual Principles for Emotional Healing, and I am your host, Dr. Denise Johnson. The topic for today's show is breaking free from the cycle of toxic relationships, and my guest is mental health professional Jasmine Menser-Lust, LCPC, from Catalyst Counseling, which is near Chicago, Illinois.
I think a lot of the time, and for right reasons, we can easily align with the partner that was hurt. And it takes a lot more effort to kind of see the other part and see what they're going through, because something was wrong for them to kind of step out and follow this alternate path. So they're going through their own emotional work.
That's an excellent point. You're right, because there's a lot of times most of us outside, we're just hating on the person that was the cheater.
And it's very, we align with people in pain. So we're like, and we want to hate them. It's like, how could you do this, especially if it's someone that we care about?
Right, yes, without realizing that they too are in their own pain or their own issues for them to have sabotaged a relationship that is or was important to them, right?
Right. Yeah. And like that's the most important part, especially in working with couples, because they're coming to you, they're coming to the third party to be this neutral. So you can't always align with the one that you feel the most pain with. It's like, okay, I know both of you are hurting in your own way. Let's see where we start with that. Yeah.
Yes. And I think the other thing that comes to my mind is, and this goes in relation to what you were talking about a few minutes ago about boundaries. If you're trying to work with your partner after he's cheated on you and he is not willing to have transparency and to rebuild trust and to do some of the other things that you're talking to, then if I've worked on my boundaries, I have to draw a line for myself. Well, if he can't meet me at this point, then what that means for me is that this relationship is not healthy. It doesn't mean the other person is not a decent person at his core. It just means that this relationship, the way it stands, may not be good for me.
Absolutely. This is not the best fit for me. And again, honoring yourself and knowing, what you need and being honest with yourself, because sometimes it is harder to walk away from that. And we want to put in our best efforts. We want to know that at the end of the day we can step back and look at ourselves and did I try? Because there is a lot of blaming once you've been cheated on. And I feel like that, can perpetuate the same cycles that allowed our boundaries to be broken in the first place in that relationship. Yes.
Excellent. And I love this next question. How do you date after you've been cheated on? And the reason why I love this question is because my observation is that there are a lot of wounded people who are dating.
Yes.
I mean, and it's not even like in the old days, people used to try to hide their wounds. These days, people are so wounded that a lot of times they wear it on their sleeve. You can see it from miles away. But yet and then they're out there wreaking havoc on all of the next people that they date based upon their pain and their woundedness.
Yes. Yeah. And I love that we're more open to being, who we authentically are. If we're hurt, we're saying it. But if it's not in the best way that serves us and the people around us, it absolutely can be more dangerous. It can be more hurtful than helpful. Yeah.
Yes. So then how do we date?
It's another long process. It's another long process.
Okay.
Because we are having, a lot of people are having these multiple afflictions from going to relationship and, having a similar experience. Again, with social medias or just maybe the people that we're aligned to being attracted to aren't maybe the best people for us. So I always work with the person and how can we make them whole again? How can we actually attune to what you need to feel like a whole person instead of maybe jumping back out there into another relationship just for that sense of security? Because a lot of the times that's where it's coming from. Someone has hurt us. Someone has made us feel, less than who we are, taking hits to our self-esteem. And now we're ready to go into the arms of someone else to secure us and make us feel validated in being a whole person. And that is not the best way to approach it. And I think that's where all those wounds that you were saying, when they're on our sleeve, because now we have multiple relationship wounds. And it's like, hey, everyone else has hurt me, so I expect you to do the same. So establishing a secure sense of security instead of that false sense of security in another person, which is essentially trusting in yourself, addressing the anxiety that might have come from going through all these other relationships. And it's the most interesting thing and the analogy that hits home the most when I'm working with clients and trying to explain to them is that they're getting all these hits from each relationship, that their brain is completely retrained. They're constantly scanning the environment for threats. And it's difficult to live in a world if you're only looking through the lens of where's the next attack coming from. Right? So it's retraining that lens to not only look for the threats, but also kind of look for the positive pieces too, so that it's not just honed in on where's the next fire, where's the next chaos piece coming from. And I feel like that's the deep part of the work, is really feeling secure within the world and within themselves.
Yes, I hear you. And it sounds like you're also saying that people really need to take the time out after they have been cheated on if they're going to date again. I think even to process through the emotional pain of it, that takes time, just like you process through the pain of anything. People avoid it because they don't want to feel the pain, and they don't want to look at the pain, I guess, because they think it's going to prolong their suffering. But the reality is that processing through it is the thing that's going to help the brain, like you said, look for something different.
Right. Yeah, sitting in pain, I feel like we're creatures of habit. We tend to go towards pleasure and avoid pain. It helps us to survive.
Yes.
So, and I look at that, how their brain is retrained after that situation. It's a survival technique, essentially.
Yes.
Anxiety sometimes is looked at as the enemy, but it's really all these things that are set up around us, like trying to help us better survive in our environment. But it might be on overload a little bit. So there is that wiggle room in there to adjust it. But rightfully so. We've been hurt, and now we're looking to make sure that never happens again.
Yes. So what is imposter syndrome, and how do we overcome that?
Now, this is something I'm absolutely passionate about because I feel like we hear the word perfectionist a lot, but I feel like we don't hear the imposter syndrome term enough to distinguish it, to see what this really is. So, imposter syndrome is really this persistent feeling that someone's going to find out that you're not as good as they think you are. It's constantly feeling like you are a phony. And it really is an internal experience where there's no evidence in the environment that you are consistently failing, that you're not meeting expectations. People who tend to have imposter syndrome are honestly overachievers. They tend to be the ones who stand out, to be the ones that we might look up to. However, their internal experience says, no, you don't really know that I'm not really as good as you think I am. This is all a fraud. You fell for it. But eventually you're going to find out. So
excellent. And let me ask you, how is that different than when you're dating someone and you met them for the first time and you try to put your best foot forward?
It is. When we're meeting someone, we do like to show the best parts of ourselves. And even in that, we might know that we're not consistently this person, right? That these are the best qualities and ideally how we want the relationship to be. However, with the imposter syndrome, they're constantly feeling that way, that even if they start off really good, they're doubting themselves. And it's this perpetual self-doubt that not only shows up in the relationship, it starts to show up in all other aspects of their life. So maybe not just intimate relationships. They feel that maybe they're not even performing good as friends. And I feel like that's usually a really good indicator to know if you're experiencing some imposter syndrome symptoms, by knowing that even with the longest relationships you've had, you still feel like you're really not doing your best, and they're going to find out you're not really showing up for the relationship like you should be.
Okay. So it sounds like for that person, self-esteem is really an issue.
Yes. Their self-esteem is it's constantly in question. The self-efficacy piece of that, their feeling of being capable of doing a task or maintaining relationships is constantly in question.
All right. Excellent. And what I have observed with people that do that is that usually they end up sabotaging the relationship in one way or another. I mean, and it's interesting because they do it all the time. Yes, they do it all the time.
That fear of failure that's behind there. It's if I could choose to fail when I know it's going to come, outside of it kind of catching me off guard, and it might not even be a conscious thought of that, but kind of just be, like you said, the self-sabotage. It lines up to, well, I feel more in control of this failure, at least, and I know I can attribute it to me, and it reinforces their whole belief, like, yep, see, they found out. I knew I wasn't good enough with that.
Interesting. So how do we keep our relationship anxiety from calling the shots?
Anxiety, and I like to look at it from the two places. So like I said, that I view it as a survival technique where anxiety is trying to alert us to something. Unfortunately, it does have a way of coming in and just shaking up your whole belief system. So in order to have it where it doesn't call all the shots, I like to think of what is it that you believe in more than your anxiety. Because anxiety will come in and challenge your belief in that moment. It will tell you, like even within imposter syndrome or just within doubting the relationship, that you're not good enough, that this isn't, that this is all going to go, chaotic, that you're never going to be able to be happy. It will convince you otherwise. So grounding yourself in an unshakable belief so that you can challenge anxiety when it does try to come up and call the shots. And
Interesting.
This unshakable belief, if it doesn't currently exist, it might take work to create one so that you actually believe it, such as I am enough or I am loved. And having the statement of, I believe in the power of loving myself, more than my anxiety right now.
Yes, I love that. I love that because it gives people something to fall back on and to focus on instead of all of the negative beliefs.
Yes, absolutely.
Interesting. All right. Can you tell us about self-esteem versus self-worth and how this is related to healing from toxic relationships?
Yes, and another piece that I'm so passionate about because it really overlaps. Self-esteem and self-worth, these two terms are buzzwords, are thrown around a lot and sometimes interchangeably, where I view self-esteem as more of a situational evaluation of ourselves, where self-worth feels more of a foundational evaluation and connected more to our overall sense of self. So an example of that might be I have high self-esteem at work. I'm a good performer there. I get, constantly good feedback. And then in my relationship, I have low self-esteem because of an in toxic relationship. I'm getting this negative feedback. I'm being criticized. This message of not feeling good enough. So absolutely in these situations, our self-esteem is going to take a hit. And it can bounce back. But it can be more resilient if my self-worth, if I'm grounded in the fact that I don't expect myself to be perfect, but I know that I am enough. And so what that person tells me, they can't chip away at who I am. They can in that situation make me feel bad about the relationship because even in a healthy relationship, we're not perfect. We're going to make mistakes, and we need that feedback from our partner so we can do better. But that's not going to crush who I am. And that's where the self-worth piece is. If that's strong, then your self-esteem can be resilient and bounce back a little bit quicker.
Interesting. So how does one go about changing their self-worth? Is it just a matter of coming up with those positive affirmations that you were talking about, those things that are unshakable, and then you remind yourself of those all the time, or how do we build our self-worth?
Yes, it is. It is having those affirmations and building that strong belief system that cannot be questioned. It's having, like, the deepest one is feeling I am good enough. That tends to be a common one that people experience, so that we can say I am good enough, but maybe today I only believe it 40%. So that means, my worth isn't strong. So when we attune to that message and really put in the work of the affirmations of addressing, those pieces that make us feel really vulnerable, such as if there's any blatant weaknesses that we might view, because it's really loving ourselves as a whole person. So looking at these weaknesses is that's me, but that doesn't mean I'm a bad person. That doesn't mean I can't, achieve things or that doesn't make me less than. So of constantly assessing worth and not self-esteem and being intentional in that, where we can check in. It's like, this has been consistently at a 7 now. This has been at a 9, where I actually believe the statement that I am good enough. And that's where it does get really personalized because there's a lot of family history, a lot of past experiences that can feed those messages where we constantly think is true. So just putting in the work to build that awareness of where these messages are coming from so that we can counter them.
Excellent. So then you kind of answered this. How do we achieve unbreakable self-confidence?
Yes, and I see that self-confidence kind of I think of it as the tip of the iceberg, right? When we're going to different situations, we might be challenged with, do I feel like I can handle it? And then once we kind of, that alert system goes off, it's like, oh, I really doubted myself there. That makes us start to question our esteem, like, oh, I'm not thinking good about myself. So I kind of imagine like this iceberg or pyramid or have you.
Yes.
So in achieving that, that foundational work of self-worth will absolutely, make that a little bit stronger at the top, so we'll have less instances of that. So the piece that I always like to start with, because that is the day-to-day piece of the confidence, is going into your day and setting your intentions, because you get to speak to all of those levels. I want to set my intention on being purposeful, or I want to set my intention on being present. I feel like even if we're kind of tired and it's early in the morning and we haven't fully connected, at least knowing that your intention to be present allows you to fully connect with yourself, so that you're not just on autopilot and going off of those old messages.
Yes, I love that. Because you can set your intent by saying even something like, no matter what comes against me today, I am going to be aware of my worth and value.
Beautiful.
And because once you set the intent, it sometimes it's almost like magic. You will see situations line up where you will have revelation regarding the thing that you have said. It's, because people think that, setting intent is silly or simple, but it's simple yet very powerful.
Yes. Isn't it amazing just how much that can change your perspective?
Yes,
I love
it does.
Yeah.
It certainly does.
Well, I think this is the perfect place for a break. Please join us when we return, when my guest, mental health professional Jasmine Menser-Lust, LCPC, from Catalyst Counseling near Chicago, Illinois, will talk more about breaking free from toxic relationships. Welcome back, everyone. You are listening to Spiritual Principles for Emotional Healing, and I am your host, Dr. Denise Johnson. The topic for today's show is breaking free from the cycle of toxic relationships, and my guest is mental health professional Jasmine Menser-Lust, LCPC, from Catalyst Counseling, which is near Chicago, Illinois.
All right. What are the pitfalls of perfectionism, and how do we remove the mask that we have it all together?
And yet it ties in a lot with our relationships, because sometimes we feel our relationships are a reflection of ourselves. So if our relationship is not going well, and we do have these perfectionistic qualities, then we really are, judging ourselves really harshly. So the pitfalls of that, because you expect so much of yourself, that you have high expectations for yourself and others. So it's possible that this perfectionistic quality is impacting the quality of your relationship, because no relationship is perfect, and yet we have sometimes even higher expectations for those around us than sometimes we might have for ourselves. There can be a lot of rigidity in the day-to-day because of these expectations. So like we were just talking about, as far as being present and being there just to respond to yourself, you're very rigid. You're kind of in that autopilot mode. So that can really increase a lot of anxiety, especially when you're not meeting the expectations that you set out for yourself. The perfection piece, it also can give you this sense of burnout because there's this unbalanced leisure time. And I hear it so much that people say, I feel good when I'm productive. And I'm like, that is great. We all love the energy of when we get stuff done. However, let this not be the only source. And it's so, when it gets unbalanced, like, oh, but I want to clean, I want to do this, like, that's beautiful. I love the energy being accomplished. What else are we doing that's kind of more of a leisure, that isn't directly connected to an output? Because that's that perfectionistic piece, is if I produce good things, then I am a good person. And that belief, shattering that one can be very difficult because the world really can co-sign that. And for good reason. You know, we all want to be good people and put good things out there. However, that can't be the primary source of just what we're producing.
And in terms of dating and relationships, I can see when people are perfectionistic, you're not going to meet anybody because no one is perfect.
No one.
No one. So women have like 100 things on this list that the man has to be, and they rigidly adhere to all of it. Well, you're going to be by yourself because there is no one that can measure up to what you have on that list. And even if they did measure up, because you're perfectionistic, you wouldn't think that they did anyway.
Right. We'd still be looking like something's missing, or they need to do more of this. Yes, absolutely. A long checklist, and we are all works in progress. So it's if you're a perfectionistic person, it's hard to see that progress. We're looking for, again, the output, right? We want them to be this ideal person for who we're striving to be.
Yes. And it's also interesting to me because I like the concept of, and it's going to sound crazy, but the perfectionism of my imperfection. There is a joy in being able to accept my quirkiness and, accept the fact that I may think differently than other people and people may not understand me in this area. There is a joy in being able to accept those imperfections in myself, because a lot of times those are the things that make me. And there is a joy and something about that I can love and nurture and cherish, even if I'm not like everybody else, even if and it's something that I see a lot of people don't really grasp onto.
Yeah, and that's not strange at all, and it's something really embracing that imperfections, really loving our whole selves, failures and all. It's a beautiful concept because we can strive to be the best person, but we're not going to be. So and that's honestly that's the second part of it, and how to overcome that perfectionistic piece. There's exercises of honestly failing on purpose. I let a lot of my clients know, like, even if it's something small, I say, hey, when you're talking, actually make a fumble, like say words in reverse, do something, because it's going to put you on the spot and you're going to feel very vulnerable. And they're like, oh, I don't know, I can do that. What's the worst that's going to happen? You're just saying words, and we can mix them up, and people will still know that we're good people, and they'll get our message. So little small exercises like that. Let's fail on purpose so that we can love our imperfections.
I love that. So how do we engage in healthy venting to friends and significant others?
Yes, it is really staying focused in your message, especially in relationships when we're trying to vent to our partners. There is a tendency to want to tell them about themselves. And and it makes sense, right? They're hurting us, so we want to absolutely lay it all out there. No one likes being told about themselves.
Right.
it usually just brings up the defenses, and the conversation doesn't go anywhere.
It goes south very quickly.
It goes south so quickly. And we can tell people what our experience is, but no one is kind of putting them in that place of being judged. Like, we automatically say, you're not meeting up to this measure. So, but if we're communicating from a sense of, this made me feel a certain way. I feel hurt when you say this, or I am uncomfortable when we argue consistently. It's not saying that it's completely different. I'm saying, like, you keep arguing with me. It's like, I'm uncomfortable with the frequency of our arguments, and something needs to change. We didn't say you need to change. Something needs to change. So really voicing your concerns. I can't, beat the dead horse enough of just sticking to your experience, really trying to remove saying you or saying you a lot. And just sticking to the I messages is a good part to help with that initial training. And then the more comfortable you get with that, it can change into your own language where you notice it doesn't feel as structured. But, sticking to your experience and then still validating your partner, because at some point you're going to stop talking. They're going to give some feedback, and just validating whatever their experience is. They might initially disagree. They say, well, you shouldn't feel that way. It's like, I understand you don't want me to feel that way, but that is my experience. And it can be very difficult, but it definitely can take us in a better direction than kind of going south as soon as we attack them.
Yes, it does. It certainly does. And in addition to those I statements, I know that for me, a lot of times if you sandwich what you're going to say to somebody with positives, so you'll start out by saying, I know that, this relationship is important to you, and I always appreciate how you do X, Y, and Z. However, I feel a certain way. And then at the end, if you thank them for something, or I appreciate that you allowed me to say this, or I love the way you listen to me when I'm upset, a lot of times it helps if you can sandwich the feedback to another person with a positive in the beginning about them and a positive at the end. I find that usually that makes it go over to the other person a lot better.
Yeah, it's more palatable, right? We were like, oh, that was like it because it is a sandwich. It's like, I can hold on to this because there's two positive things I can grip onto.
Yes.
The middle kind of was all right, but I can grip onto these positive things that you said about it. Absolutely, I love that.
Yeah, it's funny.
Well, a key piece that I've noticed that does help is making sure you maintain some type of connection. Whether that connection is to yourself through prayer or through meditation.
So how does spirituality help with the process that we've been talking about today?
Oh, I absolutely feel it's ingrained there because it keeps us grounded. Right? A lot of these things that we discuss can feel overwhelming, can feel bigger than us. And connecting to something that is bigger than us can ground us so that we can really organize the chaos that is our experience and know that, I want to say you said this at the beginning, that this may serve a greater purpose. If not for me right now, maybe for my children, maybe for someone who's close to me in my life, but this experience serves a greater purpose. So having that spiritual connection actually helps to put that into focus.
Yes, and it also reminds me in relation to what you were talking about earlier, when you're trying to build your self-worth and you're looking for things to believe in that are bigger than yourself, if you have a spiritual practice that has specific spiritual beliefs, a lot of times you can start there. In terms of building yourself up. Because, from a Christian orientation, God tells us that we are fearfully and wonderfully made. The fact that God gave his son for us so that we could live gives us a level of importance that is beyond anything that is going on and happening to us in the here and now. So if you can connect with whatever the basic tenets are of your spiritual practice regarding the importance of man and man's spirit and man's place in the world, when you have that really full in your spirit, things can come against you, but they are not going to destroy you.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Excellent.
You're less shakeable because you're definitely grounded in that. Yeah.
Yes. Wonderful. So, how can the audience contact you if they want more information?
I can be reached. So social media does have its benefits.
Yes, it does.
I am on Facebook. And Positive Conversations can continue there. You can find me on Facebook. I'm at Catalyst Counseling, LLC.
Excellent.
And through my website, you can also go to catalystcounselinggroup.com.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, I wanted to tell you what a wonderful show this was today. I so appreciate the openness of your heart to share with me and the audience the wisdom that you have gathered from working with people who are struggling with their relationships. And again, I just want to thank you so much for being here today.
Yes, it's my pleasure. Thank you. It's been a great conversation, and I love the viewpoints that we've shared. And I really hope the listeners get something from it and enjoyed it as well.
Excellent, excellent. So, at the end of my show, I always ask my guests to either say a blessing or a prayer over the audience about the things that we've spoken about today. And so I'm going to ask you to do that for me now.
Yes, yes. So, God, I want to pray for the well-being and peace of those listening with us here today. I pray and encourage those listening to remain open to your love and to your message. God, I know that you continue to work through those who walk in your faith, and that the message in this show will serve a greater purpose today. I pray that for those who may be struggling with themselves and even feeling lost in a relationship, that you look out for them, Lord. I pray that you know that they can always turn to you, and that you will give them the strength to seek peace, to seek safety from those around them, and that you will bless them with the strength to trust in themselves. And God, that you would let them know that you can make a way for them, and that this and any struggle they'll be able to get through as long as they can walk with you. And in Jesus' name, amen.
And amen.
Dear Lord and Heavenly Father, Father, I praise you and I thank you for another opportunity to speak your name. I praise you and I thank you, O God, for a venue in the marketplace where your name has the preeminence, O God. I lift up my wonderful guest to you today, O God. I thank you for her life. I thank you, O God, how you have placed the seeds of compassion in her heart to help others, O God. I bless her practice, O God. I bless every soul that you bring there, O God, that you would heal them and meet them at their point of need. I thank you, O God, if there is anyone in the audience today, O God, who finds themselves in a toxic relationship, O God. I thank you, O God, that by your Spirit, you will breathe the breath of life over them, O God, so that they will understand, O God, that this is not the end for them. This is the beginning of what you are going to do in their life, O God. I speak safety over them today, O God. I thank you, O God, that you will give them the ability to heal in the areas where they are hurt, O God. I thank you, O God, that you will give them revelation regarding what boundaries to set, O God. I thank you, O God, that you will give them people to partner with them, O God, to help them walk this thing out, O God. I thank you, O God, that whatever else the audience stands in need of, O God, whether it's in the area of relationships, whether it is in the area of deepening their relationship with you, I just thank you, O God, that you will do exceedingly abundantly above all that we could ask or think. I bless this program. I bless the listeners. I bless this radio station. I bless all things in the name of your Son, whom I utterly adore. Amen and amen.
You have been listening to Spiritual Principles for Emotional Healing, and I am your host, Dr. Denise Johnson. And this show will be available to you to listen to on my Facebook page at facebook.com/Spiritual Principles for Emotional Healing, because I am believing God that as you repeatedly listen to these prayers, He will heal your brokenness the same way He has used these prayers to minister to my brokenness. Also, if you scroll to the bottom of the page, some of my earlier shows are dedicated to discussing the specific principles God